All right, so a couple days ago, I covered that New York Times investigative report that was basically exposing the U.S. military for coming out and lying about one of the recent drone strikes that we had as we were pulling out in Afghanistan that ended up killing 10 innocent civilians, and which the military said was a drone strike that was targeting a supposed ISIS-K suicide bomber. Now, because of that investigation by the New York Times, we found out that it was actually an innocent aid worker who was killed by this drone strike along with 9 members of his family, and there was no ISIS-K suicide bomber to be found in sight. And now the Pentagon has finally admitted this, basically only because they were pressured to by this New York Times report. So Afghanistan drone strike, the Pentagon previously described as righteous, killed as many as 10 civilians, officials say. So I want to read some of the details here because this entire thing is just a clusterfuck of ridiculousness, and then we're going to get to an actual video of the general coming out and apologizing for this war crime, and then we're going to get into the lack of accountability that we are inevitably going to see from this. So a U.S. drone strike launched in Afghanistan late last month killed as many as 10 civilians and not an ISIS-K terrorist, as the U.S. military previously reported. The Pentagon acknowledged Friday. General Frank McKenzie, the commander of the U.S. Central Command, called the strike a tragic mistake during a news conference on Friday afternoon. It's not just a tragic mistake, it's a literal war crime that there needs to be accountability for. But they continue saying an investigation by Central Command determined that the August 29th strike in Kabul, which Joint Chief Chairman General Mark Milley previously described as a righteous strike, killed an innocent aid worker, identified by friends and colleagues as Zamari Ahmadi, and as many of 9 of his family members, including up to 7 children. So again, remember, General Mark Milley called this a righteous strike after it happened, and the entire mainstream media, like the good little military-industrial complex lackeys that they are, went and reported this dutifully so, basically without any question. And it was only later, after the New York Times report ended up coming out, and the New York Times was, they get credit for actually revealing a lot of this information, but the New York Times, it was only because of that report came out that the Pentagon is now being forced to come out and admit this after, again, they called it a righteous strike initially. It's very important that we understand this cycle of the U.S. acting with complete impunity in this region of the world, conducting these airstrikes, conducting these drone strikes, which frequently have killed citizens or innocent civilians over the last couple of decades, and then this cycle of them doing this with no accountability, and then the media reporting that, oh wow, Joe Biden went and got an ISIS-K suicide bomber. Isn't he fantastic? Isn't he a strong leader? And then it's only in the very rare instances that it actually does get exposed for the fraud that it actually is. And we have a little bit of accountability in this case. Only the accountability that we have seen so far is them coming out and admitting it and apologizing for it. But they continue saying that, quote, we now assess that it is unlikely that the vehicle and those who died were associated with ISIS-K or were a direct threat to U.S. forces. Unlikely is doing a lot of heavy lifting there and giving them a good amount of leeway to pretend as if they didn't know this, but it's not just unlikely, it's 100% certain that they were not associated with ISIS-K in any way, shape, or form. It was literally an aid worker who was working for a California-based aid organization, and he was, delivering food and water to his community, desperate people who had been affected by the war, and he has nothing to do with ISIS-K. If anything, because of his association with a U.S. aid organization, he would have been a likely target of ISIS-K, not somebody who would be associated with them, but still they choose to use this language, again trying to shift the burden on this suspicious brown guy over there, that they rely on Americans continuing to believe, even though we do now 100% was not associated with ISIS-K, trying to use language that implants in the seeds of Americans' minds that there was some gray area within this entire thing, which there was not. And they continue saying, McKinsey said the United States is considering making reparation payments to the family of the victims. Gonna be kind of difficult when you just killed 10 fucking members of the same family. Isn't that gonna be kind of difficult? I mean, reparations, sure, that would be fantastic. We should be doing reparations for the entire Afghanistan war. We owe the people in Afghanistan billions and billions of dollars in reparations and repayments and rebuilding the infrastructure, and nothing can actually rebuild the lives that we have taken, obviously. And so, reparations are something, but it's nowhere close to enough when you just killed 10 members of the same family. But they continue saying that U.S. intelligence reportedly followed the car Ahmadi was driving in for 8 hours because it had been observed at a compound associated with the terrorist group known as ISIS-K. Turns out this was not a compound that was associated with ISIS. It was in fact his office that he was going to, and the things that they said were bombs that he was planting in his car were actually water jugs that he was bringing back to his community and his family. And during that time, they say the movements of the car corresponded to other intelligence about ISIS plans for an attack on the airport, McKinsey said. The strike was conducted as Ahmadi pulled into the driveway of his home, which was located about 3 kilometers from the airport, and the drone strike set off a large secondary explosion, according to him, which officials originally said was evidence that the car was carrying explosives, but which the investigation determined was most likely set off by a propane tank located in the driveway. And then now we can get to the actual statement that was made by this guy, General McKinsey, and just listen to how casually he talks about this, because it's really just wild. This is a war crime that this man is responsible for to a large degree, which he will himself admit at the end, but still no accountability. But here's what he had to say.
Good afternoon. I'm here to brief the results of the investigation I directed following the report of civilian casualties from our strike in Kabul on 29 August. Having thoroughly reviewed the findings of the investigation and the supporting analysis by interagency partners, I am now convinced that as many as 10 civilians, including up to 7 children, were tragically killed in that strike. Moreover, we now assess that it is unlikely that the vehicle and those who died were associated with ISIS-K or were a direct threat to U.S. forces. I offer my profound condolences to the family and friends of those who were killed. This strike was taken in the earnest belief that it would prevent an imminent threat to our forces and the evacuees at the airport. But it was a mistake, and I offer my sincere apology. As the combatant commander, I am fully responsible for this strike and this tragic outcome.
Okay, well, if that's true, and you are accepting full responsibility for this strike, well, this strike was a war crime, okay? Under international law, you should now be at least being court-martialed or at most be facing an international war crimes tribunal, okay? This guy just accepted full responsibility. Now, does that mean that he actually wants responsibility and accountability? No, of course it fucking doesn't. All he's saying by, oh, I accept responsibility is I'm going to give you a light apology and then please everybody move along with your days. That's what he's saying right now, okay? He doesn't actually want to accept accountability or responsibility for this. If he did, he would be in prison, okay? This is a war crime, all right? I know that we talk about these terms all the time, but you just killed 10 innocent civilians, okay? You don't just get to say, oops, whoopsie daisy, it was a mistake, sorry about that, and then just go about your day. No, I mean, that is exactly what we have been doing throughout the last 2 decades of this war, but that's not what accountability looks like. So don't pretend like you're taking accountability and responsibility when you are literally doing the opposite and just trying to give a light apology and then move along with your day. And they even come out and say this, that there won't be any accountability. They say, General McKinsey, head of U.S. Central Command, to announce no ISIS-K fighters were killed in that drone strike, 10 civilians killed, including 7 children in the Toyota, and no disciplinary action is expected, officials say. The U.S. military stands by the intel leading to the strike. The U.S. military stands by the intel leading to the strike. The intel was 100% wrong. The intel was telling you that this was an ISIS-K suicide bomber. If you are standing by this intel, what does that tell the American people about your ability, your competence, and carrying out these strikes into the future? Because in that same press conference, General McKinsey had the audacity to literally say, if don't allow this strike to make you think that we can't keep conducting strikes in the future to go after ISIS-K. He had the audacity in this same exact press conference where he was admitting that they made complete intelligence. It was a complete intelligence failure. It was a complete failure in terms of actually getting the people that they were looking for. And then he turns around and in that same press conference is like, well, don't let this affect your opinion on whether or not we can keep doing these drone strikes. Of course, we're going to keep doing them, and you should trust us to do so. Why? You're literally admitting right now that you're standing by the intel that was completely wrong. If anything, at least admit that the intelligence was completely wrong and that there's something wrong with your intelligence gathering, obviously. But the fact of the matter is, that's exactly what it's been like throughout the last 2 decades of this war. The intel was never good, okay? We've been killing innocent civilians left and right, okay? 10 innocent civilians were killed in this strike, but in 2019 alone, under the Trump administration, over 700 innocent civilians minimum, as estimated by the Cost of War project done by Brown University, were killed in 2019 alone. 700, okay? Did the media report on that? No, of course they didn't. But, 10 versus 700 in a year, right? This is a tiny fraction, a tiny percentage of what the entire war has been looking like. And has there ever been accountability? Was there accountability for Obama when there was a 5-month period during his administration where they killed 90% innocent civilians? Was there any accountability for that administration? Was there accountability for the Bush administration doing torture programs programs? Was there accountability for the Trump administration escalating our drone warfare by like 400% and killing hundreds of civilians every single year? No, there's never been any accountability, and there will never be any accountability, as they are literally admitting right here. So listen, what is this all, pointing towards? Well, it's pointing towards, one, we should obviously fucking end the drone program, because clearly, if they're going to stand by this level of intelligence, then the intelligence is non-existent, and we shouldn't trust these motherfuckers to be killing people on the opposite side of the planet from, 300 miles in the sky or whatever. Obviously, we should be ending the drone program. It's been a complete failed program. The only thing that it is doing is allowing the U.S. military to continue committing these war crimes with impunity, with no accountability to the American people. And meanwhile, because we're conducting these things, these strikes from very high up in the sky in either airplanes or in drones, where they're operated from miles and miles away by some drone operator, the fact that we are so detached from that, and that American lives are not necessarily being risked on the ground, and that you don't necessarily have boots on the ground troops coming home in body bags and coming home in caskets for the American people to see, well, that gives them a little bit of distance to continue maintaining this war. And that's exactly what Biden has said he wants to do. He said, I want to maintain our over the horizon military strike capabilities in Afghanistan. He has said we are likely going to be working with the Taliban to conduct airstrikes against ISIS-K. So if that's the case, this is the exact type of strike that ended up killing these 10 civilians that Biden is going to be continuing in Afghanistan. So that's why this is an important story, not just in terms of trying to get some semblance of accountability, which there most likely never will be, but on top of that, this is what we're going to be continuing to do, okay? This is the new generation of warfare that is being conducted by the U.S. empire to continue to suppress all of these different regions around the world that we are involved in. This is what the warfare is going to look like. It's very high up in the sky, it's very detached, and it's a lot less visually bloody directly to the American people to see, because we're not seeing American troops coming home in body bags in large numbers. We just see, a little explosion on a screen, and we say, whoops, hope you got the bad guy, right? Hope it wasn't innocent civilians this time, and we never really know the truth of what's going on the ground. So listen, cancel the drone program, and we need a tribunal. We need these motherfuckers who continue to do drone strikes and airstrikes and commit war crimes like this with complete impunity. We need accountability. So there should be an investigation into these people, and there should be accountability. And listen, General McKenzie, if you're the guy who's taking responsibility for this war crime, then you should be punished for that war crime.